So today's session is all about performance management. We're going to look at what performance management is, and you might be surprised about the way in which we define, as an HR practice, we define performance management. People tend to have a very negative view of performance management, but actually we take a very business-focused view on performance management. We're also going to look at why you performance manage, how you do that, and some of the bits that are important, that if you ever need to rely on your performance management process, you're able to do so at a later date. Looking at positive performance, looking at negative performance, and looking at the risks of not managing this effectively. If you've got any questions, you should also have a Q&A box that is available on your screen. So you should have a chat window. You should also have a Q&A window. So if you've got any questions, please pop them in the Q&A window. Unfortunately, the lovely Brenda is off sick today, so I'm manning the Q&As, which means that I'm not going to focus on it while we're doing the presentation. I'll come to those at the end. But if you've got any questions, so that you don't forget them, just put them into the Q&A, and then at the end I will pick them up and go through each of those questions. I will also probably unmute people later, just so that if you've got any questions you want to ask verbally, then you can do that as well, and we can have an interactive session. So we're going to move very swiftly, as I said today. We have got a lot to get through. So first of all, what is performance management? For me, and for the clients that we manage, it's actually about letting the staff know what you expect of them. People think about performance management as being when someone isn't performing, but actually that's much further down the process. It's more about making sure they understand what you expect from them, so that they are able to meet and hopefully exceed those expectations. Why do you want them to do that? Well, because you want a successful business. So actually you need to manage their expectations and align their performance with what the company needs, with the company's goals, with the company's objectives. And those are both long-term and short-term. So they might be for the individual, for the team, or for the company as a whole. But when you look at an employee's performance, you do need to look at the whole picture. And it all counts. So performance management actually starts before the person even joins the business. The way in which you write the job description, the way in which you write the job advert so that you attract the right type of people, the way in which you conduct the interviews, it's all about setting expectation. And if you don't get the job description right, if you don't align that job description and the skills that you require to what the business needs in the long term, then you're never actually going to get the right people doing the job, which means that you're absolutely creating a rod for your own back before you even start. So getting the job description right is the first step of performance management. The second step is getting the job advert right. And people very often will take the job description and that becomes their job advert. And actually that's the wrong way to think about it. You actually need to be wearing a marketer's hat when you're thinking about the job adverts. You need to be thinking about how you attract the right people through the words that you use. It's a little bit like SEO. It's putting in search words, it's putting in keywords, which make it easier for you then to sift applications, because you'll hopefully have less of them, because the right people have applied and the wrong people have looked at it and hopefully gone, no, this isn't for me. And again, that's the first part of managing their performance. The next part is the interview. You need somebody that you can work with. You need somebody that gets the organisation. You need somebody who's excited about what the organisation is doing. Because if they're not demonstrating that at interview, if they're not able to give you evidence as to why they think they can do the job and why this is the right organisation for them, then actually they're never going to perform at their best for the organisation, because they're never going to be fully engaged. So they may be motivated to come to work because they get paid, because it gets them out of the house. But actually what you want is people who are fully engaged with your business. And that, again, makes that performance management process so much easier. And you can assess for that in interview. What reading have they done? What research have they done? Have they applied to other people in the industry? How do they see you against your competitors? What's their real understanding? What's their passion? What's their drive for your business and for the role that you're offering them? The next place where you start to manage performance is in their contracts of employment. And that seems like a really weird place to be managing performance, but it's your mandate to manage. And I go on about this loads. So if you've joined us for other webinars, you will have heard this term, mandate to manage. And having a contract of employment that tells the person what their job is, what hours they're expected to be there, what the sick policy is, what the annual leave policy is, what the dress code policy is, what your health and safety policy is, what your disciplinary and grievance policy is. By having all of that documented and really clearly communicated that people have signed up to, they sign their contract of employment, then if they understand what's expected of them, you've got a fighting chance of them achieving it. But actually, if they're not achieving it, then this is where you can fall back and say, well, actually, you said you would be working 37 hours a week or 40 hours a week. You knew that you had a half an hour lunch break and 2 15-minute breaks. You knew that to work in this organization, you had to come in wearing a suit and tie, or a suit, or that we were business casual but don't allow trainers. And if those issues are causing you performance issues further down the line, then that's your contract of employment and potentially your handbook, if you're big enough to need one, that you can then fall back on. The next part is really, really important. And a case that I'm dealing with this week absolutely brings this home to me. In our contracts of employment, we always insist on a 6-month probation period. Now, it's up to our clients whether they adopt that or not, but our absolute recommendation is for 6 months, because people can learn, they take time to learn the job, they can fake it for a few months. You never really know how someone's performing until they've really had a chance to bed into that role. And that probation period is key, and we'll come back to that in the next slide. The final bit is the performance management. So once they're a full-time employee, what do you do with them? How do you manage their performance? Because it isn't, and I can't stress this enough, it is not the once a year dreaded appraisal. That is the worst possible way to get the best from your staff. So if you're just doing annual appraisals, you're never going to win on the performance management front. So let's just look at that probation piece. Induction. What do you do with them their first day, their first week, their first month? That's all part of their induction. It's their training, and you're setting the tone. So if you want them to be performing like the best of your staff are currently performing, then making sure that they spend time with those people, that they understand not only their job, but how it fits in with the rest of the organization. They may not actually be able to do the job that everybody else is doing because they may not have the qualifications, experience, or skills. But if you're expecting somebody to work as part of a team, they at least need to understand what those other people do and how it either feeds into or feeds from the position that you want them to do. That induction and planning that induction is really important. Getting that right then helps them with the rest of their probation period. A mid-probation review. So hopefully you've got a 6-month probation period, and that mid-probation review at 3 months is key. It's an opportunity to sit down with the person and say, you've got all the training now, let's see you put it into practice. Please, and I can't stress this enough, do not sign people off in that mid-probation review if they are doing well. If they're doing really well and they've hit the ground running and they've picked it all up and they're fabulous, tell them that. But their contract of employment says 6 months, and there is absolutely no harm in making sure that they work out the rest of their probation period. We're dealing with a situation at the moment where somebody was confirmed after 3 months, and at month 4, all of the sickness kicked in and the absence. And we've now gone back and looked at the contract, and if we'd have been able to terminate in the probation period for failed probation, it will have saved the company a lot of time, a lot of money, and a huge amount of stress. So that mid-probation review is really important, either to help the person get onto the right track, or to congratulate them for the massive progress that they've made. And right, now let's see what you can do with all the training that you've had. And then the end of probation review. Please, please, please do not leave that until the last day of your 6-month period. You want to be scheduling it at about 5 months, and you want to be holding it at about 5.5 months. If you're going to get rid of somebody at that point, that shouldn't be coming as any surprise to them. They should have been getting lots of support, lots of feedback, lots of help, and they should know that it is a risk that their probation period is not going to be passed, and that their employment may be terminated or their probation period extended. All of that, getting that right in the first 6 months is going to set the tone for the rest of your performance management for however long that person's with you. And it may be 2 years, it may be 10 years, it may be 20 years. But that's going to be really, really important. The tone that you set says a lot about you as a manager as well. So let's look at that performance management cycle. One-to-ones. Every organisation does this differently. If you're in schools, if you're in charities, if you're supporting people, then you might have what are called supervisions. Ordinarily, in commercial business, in retail, hospitality, office environments, they're called one-to-ones. Some organisations, they'll happen on a weekly basis. Other organisations, they might happen on a monthly basis. Sometimes they're very formal, sometimes they're much more informal. It's important that they happen. It's important that they're documented, even if it's just, these are the things that were discussed, these were the things that are agreed, these are the actions and the outcomes, and who is taking responsibility for them. Those should be kept and referred to at the beginning of the next meeting. I tend to encourage people to say these shouldn't necessarily be operational. They can be. But there should also be a little bit of time in there to discuss the individual. Are you okay? What are you enjoying? What are you not enjoying about the role? As well as what's going well, what's not going well within the actual job itself. Because if you're managing their performance, you want to make sure that they're hitting their targets, that they are not going to turn around to you in 6 months' time and say, well, I never had that training, or I hadn't ever been shown how to do that, or I was never given the passwords to that system. You don't want to give them any excuses. So by managing them consistently on a regular basis, what you're doing is making sure that they are as effective as possible, as quickly as possible, and that you're removing any excuses for failure later down the line. Goal setting. Goal setting is really important, and a lot of organisations will do it on an annual basis, but actually it can also be done in those one-to-ones. What are you going to deliver? What are the big things? What are the things that you're going to work on for the next 12 months? What are the things that you're going to work on for the next 3 months? What does that mean that you need to be delivering today? There's a great book called The One Thing. If I get a chance, I'll grab it off the shelf. And it says, what is the one thing that I need to be doing today to deliver my goals for the week, to deliver my goals for the month, to deliver my goals for the quarter? You get the idea. And those goals are really important. It's then really important to review them as well. Another book and series that I love is the Gino Wickman series called Traction. And in Traction, they talk about quarterly reviews. And they talk about rocks, and the rocks are set on a 90-day basis, and they're reviewed quarterly. So every single person in the organisation will have 3 or 4 rocks that they are working on, and those are quarterly milestones that people's performance is assessed against. Again, Gino Wickman, a great series, and if you want more details, I can drop them as those to you. The annual review. The annual review should never, never come as a surprise to anybody. You shouldn't be sitting in that annual review and going, do you remember that conversation that we had 6 months ago when you said this or when you did that? That's the most horrendous way to manage. It becomes really, really confrontational, and it actually needs to be a much more positive discussion. I would really spend that time in the annual review not focused on the work. I would spend it focused on the individual, the way they interact, the way they deliver, their overall presence and contribution to the organisation. The next one is the personal development plans. And the personal development plans I've put in brackets because they're not really part of performance management. They're about the individual. So they might be about training that they need, but they're also about career development. They're also about what's next for this individual. How do we keep them engaged? And having a training record, again, it's separate slightly to performance management, but it all kind of comes into the same pot. But having a training record, going over that training record, looking at what training the person needs in the next year, looking at what job that person wants to do. Now, actually, it's really, really hard in SMEs, unless you're growing your business, to say, well, actually, this person is going to be promoted into that role and then into that role, and that's their career path. It's so much easier in a large organization where there are clear departments, clear levels, management of teams. But it is still possible to look at an individual and say, what do you want to achieve? Where do you want to be going? And as a business owner, you need to understand and accept that for that person to reach their full potential, they may not be doing that within your organization. They may need to leave in order to get that next career step. And actually, if you manage that process right, they will always thank you, and they will help you to find the right next person. They'll leave you in really, really good shape. But if you hold them back, then they'll end up becoming resentful. Sorry, let's put that on Do Not Disturb. And what you don't want is a resentful employee at any stage in anybody's career. Okay, so why performance manage? The first one is to motivate the employee. People still need motivation. So whatever their role, they may be a receptionist, they may be a financial accountant, they may be the marketing director. Everybody wants a sense of achievement. Everybody wants a sense of control. And they need to understand the role that they play in the bigger picture. And that's where setting those goals, having a business strategy, communicating your strategy to your team is really, really important, because it helps them to see where you need them to be. It helps them to understand why you're asking them to do the basics, why you're asking them to double check, why you get upset when they send out documents with typos on them. You need to help them see the bigger picture. The next thing is aligning to team performance. So if you're fortunate enough to have 3 or 4 people in a team, where does each of those individuals sit within the team? A lot of the time, conflict within an organization and poor performance will start because somebody said something to someone else that they didn't like, or they got the wrong end of the stick. I had a situation yesterday where I was told that somebody borrowed their coffee cup and they didn't like it and they got upset. And that has caused the person to, stop performing at the level that they were at because they thought colleagues didn't like them. That's not a good position to be in. So make sure that they understand their role within the team, their contribution to the team, and as much clarity as possible that you're able to give them, so that unless it's a job share, and actually if it's a job share it's possibly more important, but that they know that this is their job, this is what they're required to do, and something else is somebody else's responsibility. One of the biggest frustrations for a lot of businesses is that someone will try and be helpful and it will put somebody else's nose out of joint, and they won't necessarily have done the job right because it's not their job. So if you're trying to cover for someone on sick leave, great, fine. Processes, documented processes, helping people to understand how the team hangs together, how they play a part in that team, and how that's part of the bigger picture. And then the third element there is that business success. It's about, and I've said it again, communicating the vision, the goals, the why. Why is the organization doing what it's doing? That often helps people to up their game, especially in organizations such as charities. So how do you measure performance? Well, that's going to depend on the nature of your business, the culture of your business, the roles of the types of people that you have within the business. But as a general rule, you're looking at what are the skills that they have, what's their capacity to do the job, what's their desire to do the job. And all of those things, if you get it right, will lead to acceptable performance. So do they have the knowledge? Do they have the experience to do the job? If you take on somebody, do they have the aptitude to gain those skills and experiences? The next thing is capacity. So one of the biggest issues with small and medium-sized businesses is that they never have enough staff. And therefore, some of the staff feel a little bit put upon because they're being asked to do lots and lots of work, which may mean longer hours, may mean working through lunch breaks. There will come a time when actually one person can't do the job properly. And sometimes that's where you see performance standards slip because people will become careless. They'll get emails out without double checking them. They'll forget to put attachments on them. They'll forget to file things properly because they just don't have the time. So as a line manager, you need to be watching capacity really, really carefully and make sure that if you get to the point where performance is slipping or that the standards aren't quite what you want them to be, you need to take a look at whether or not what you're asking them to do is still reasonable and practical in the time allowed. And if not, you might need to look at bringing in some part-time resource or even a whole second person. But that's really important. And then the third element is desire. There's a can't do versus a won't do. A can't do is where somebody doesn't have the skills to do it or perhaps the capacity. A won't do is where somebody doesn't have the desire to do it. They've got to have a passion. You don't want presenteeism. You don't want people to just turn up day after day, come in, sit down, be a bum on the seat. You don't need bums in your organization. You need people who are engaged, who have a passion, who have a desire to deliver to your standards, to your clients, whether it's products or services. And those three come together. So how do you measure those? In one-to-ones, it's much more informal, but they can be quite contentious. They can be contentious if you do have a good relationship, but also if you don't have a good relationship. And the one-to-ones, I'm talking about appraisals, quarterly review meetings, your weekly one-to-one meetings, anything where it's one person talking to another. And very often it will become the line manager almost giving a school report. It'll become, this is what I think of you as an employee, as an individual. If they don't have a good relationship, then that's a really difficult conversation. But actually, from experience, we've also found that if they do have a good relationship, then you're not necessarily going to get a really honest, open opinion because perhaps the line manager doesn't want to offend the employee. They might be friends socially. This has happened, it happens a lot in the micro businesses where either they were friends to start with or perhaps they've become friends through work because there might only be 2 or 3 people working in the office. And giving feedback, giving constructive feedback can be really, really difficult in those situations. We're doing quite a lot of work now around 360-degree feedback. And 360-degree feedback works in organizations where you've kind of got more than 20 people. And it means that each person can be evaluated by 4 or 5 other people. Now, they might be direct reports, they might be colleagues of the same level, they might be clients, or they might be line managers or the directors of the organization. It is quite a big exercise. It needs to be thought through very carefully. But what happens is you don't end up with one person's view against another. What you get is a complete picture. And what that enables you to do is to actually have that meeting and say, this is the feedback that I'm giving you based on multiple people. This is not my opinion of you. And you do need enough people, because otherwise it can become, well, I know who said that and I know who said that. And you don't want that kind of situation. But what it means is that you can use other managers to provide that feedback. It's not reliant necessarily on the line manager providing that feedback, because what you're doing is feeding back the views of others. So you can bring in people who are good at giving feedback, and they might not be a manager within your organization. They may be so there may not be a line manager. It might be, for example, the office manager. It might be one of the partners, or even a business coach or an accountant that's able to deliver that feedback less emotionally than that conflict between the one-to-one line manager relationship. Okay, positive performance. We all love positive performance. Smart objectives. When you are, we talked about goal setting. When you're setting those goals, they need to be smart. They need to be really, really specific. So it might be to bring in 5 new clients a month. It might be to make 100 phone calls a week. It might be to send out 20 packages a day. It might be so that there are no quality issues, no quality control issues with a particular product in a certain time period. So those will vary, but making them really specific to the individual is going to be really important, because that's how you can then measure their performance. And that's what the M stands for. It makes it measurable. So you're measuring the numbers of things that happen, or the number of incidences that don't happen, and you can use key performance indicators for that. Sometimes traffic light systems are really good. Is it achievable? Are you setting something that realistically this person is able to do? Is it an achievable target that you're setting them? Is it relevant? So you don't want to be asking people to do stuff that isn't relevant to their role. And then the last one there is time bound. So if you're going to ask somebody to send out 20 widgets or produce 20 widgets, do they have to do that per day, per week, per month? And that might be the processing of invoices. If you're thinking about perhaps a payroll scenario, to have 100% of employees paid before the 25th of every month, that might be the target, because it's really specific and it's highly relevant to a payroll administrator to make sure that people get paid at the right time. And then there are 2 key words there. One is a significant level, and the other is a sustained period of time. So you are looking at not people who are just able to turn it on when you've said to them, you're not doing what you need to be doing. You need them to be working consistently at that level, not just for the day that you've given them the kick up the backside, not just for the month after their annual appraisal, but all the time. And that's one of the things that we'll talk about. That phrase is a significant and sustained level of improvement, very much comes into looking at the negative performance management. People who are adding value to the business, people who are engaged. We're talking about engagement a huge amount. It's not just about motivation. It's about whether people see themselves with the organization within the next 3 to 5 years, and whether people are happy to recommend you as an employer or as a service or product provider to family and friends. And if those people are your advocates, if those people are your biggest champions, then that's how you want your staff to be, fully engaged with your business. Happy customers. I love receiving positive customer feedback. Where our staff have done a good job, it's really nice for them to be told that. And very often the clients will go back to the staff individually. We, on a regular basis, run something called a Net Promoter Score. If you want more information about it, just drop me a question. But the Net Promoter Score looks at how many people are promoting your business, how many are passive about your business, and how many are detractors from your business. If you can get happy customers, that comes back to your staff. That comes directly back to your staff performance and your business success. Are you making a profit? Are you increasing turnover? Have you been able to take on more clients? What are the measures that you use within your organization? And then once you've got staff performing at the level that you need and want them to perform, you need to reward them. And that's going to look different for everybody. I don't know if you've come across Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It's a triangle, and at the bottom level is the absolute basics. It's the, they need to be paid the basic amount of money. They need warmth. They need somewhere to live. They need a roof over their heads. They need family and friends and support. And once they've got that, then other levels of need come into play. And it may be that, somebody's starting a family and wants to be able to afford a bigger house, or they perhaps want a mortgage, or, now they're looking for healthcare benefits or increased pension benefits, or now they actually want an organization where the culture of the organization is aligned with their own ethos. And culture is becoming a huge, huge element of people deciding who they are going to work for in the future. What works for one person isn't going to work for another person. I know one employer where they will actually sit down with the people, with every member of staff at the beginning of the year, and they say, if you achieve these goals, what do you want your reward to be? And that might be a designer handbag, it might be a weekend away, it might be a spa treatment, it might be, a week away, it might be a new car. You never really know what the person's going to ask for. It needs to be proportional to the job that they're doing and the contribution that they're making to the business. But if you're able to think about reward that's going to really encourage the performance levels that you need, and you're able to individually tailor those rewards, you are going to have a different level of motivation amongst your staff. Reward is also designed to be a reward for past performance, but it also needs to be motivational for future performance. And you need to think about that and get that balance right when you're putting together a package for people. Some people are very transactional. They just want the money because that's what drives them. They're just after their bonuses or their commissions. And you'll get that specifically in recruitment consultancies, in estate agencies, anywhere where there is a high commission element. And the other side of that then is the relational, and there is a reward model which we're going to cover in another seminar, but the relationship is more about the career opportunities that you give people, the development that you give people, the opportunities to expand themselves, the environment in which they're working. So, is it a broom cupboard environment at the bottom of a basement of a big office block, or is it a light airy environment? Do you allow people to work from home? Do you allow people flexi time? And that will depend on the organization. But for some people, that's reward and that's motivational. And you need to be having a conversation with your staff, not only that sets the goals and the objectives, but that really understands what reward looks like to them. Negative performance. This is what people traditionally think about as being performance management. So it's really important to give feedback. And the quicker that feedback is given to the particular incident or to the particular problem, the more useful and the more powerful it is. Now, I'm going to beg you, please, please, please do not yell and shout and scream at your staff in front of their colleagues. been there, seen it, had it done. It is not pleasant, and you will end up with a claim against the organisation for bullying or harassment or something else rather more nasty. Feedback needs to be given constructively, productively, and linked to specific examples. So if you've got an actual customer complaint, try and get it in writing. If you've got a complaint from another colleague, and I understand why this isn't always easy, but you need to be specific. You need to be able to get permission from the person raising the complaint, because otherwise you're never going to help that person improve their performance. And the more specific you can be and the closer to the incident, the better it is. In some cases, you're going to need a performance improvement plan, and that will set out the levels of concern. It will set out exactly what needs to be done. It will have smart objectives. It will be time bound, and it needs to have really solid review periods in there. That can be given alone, or it can be tied into a capability management process. It depends on your organisation. It may also depend a little bit on the individual, how militant they are, and how much they're likely to kick back or refuse to accept the feedback that they're being given. Some people are really, really aware when they're not achieving what you want them to achieve. Other people are completely unself-aware. I'm sure there's a proper term for that. A complete lack of self-awareness. They will have no idea that they've just offended somebody. They will swear blind that they've done everything right. And that's what then becomes contentious. If you're going to follow a capability management process, you do need to make sure that you follow your own internal policies and procedures. If you don't have those, then please, pick up the phone, get support from somebody, but make sure if you're going to start down a capability management process, you know what that process needs to be and it doesn't come back and bite you on the bum later. Always monitor the performance and have regular review meetings. Don't just wait until the end of, if you give someone a 3-month period in which to improve, don't wait till the end of that 3-month period before you turn around and tell them that they failed. Doesn't help you, doesn't help them. And again, if you were to end up in an employment tribunal, that would count against you. If you go down a proper capability or performance management route and people still aren't making the changes that you need them to make, and they're not able or not willing to perform at the levels that you need them to perform at, you've got options. You could change their role. That could be just taking things out of their role or doing things differently. It could be a demotion. Don't demote somebody unless you've gone through a proper process and that is a decided outcome of that process. Because otherwise, again, it can be taken to an employment tribunal, and the way in which you handle that within an organisation is also quite difficult because it becomes loss of face. So you need to be really careful if you're going to demote somebody, but it is an option available to you. You need to be looking at formal warnings. People need to understand the ramifications of not making a significant and sustained improvement in their performance. And ultimately, you're looking at termination. If somebody is just not able to do the job, then you are able to terminate them, and that will be on performance. If you've followed a capability. Some organisations don't have a separate capability process. They'll use their disciplinary process. It's not a problem. You can discipline for both conduct and performance, but some organisations prefer to separate the two. So they will manage conduct through a disciplinary process and performance through a capability process. It depends on your organisation, depends what you've got documented, depends what you're comfortable with, and potentially on the individuals involved as well. So what are the risks? Well, as with all things, there's a failure. There's a risk if you fail to follow a proper process. If you have a documented process in your contracts of employment or an employee handbook, then it is really, really important that you follow your own process. So going on to Facebook and saying, I've got an employee who is always late and is never doing what I need them to do. What should I do? And loads of people come back and say, fire them, dismiss them, have an informal chat with them, write them a letter. All great, but it's actually absolutely useless and dangerous to you. You need to absolutely follow your own internal policies and procedures properly, because failure to do so, no matter what the person's done, will result in you being in the wrong. And should it end up in an employment tribunal, a failure to follow your own process is going to cause you a problem. No getting away from it. In an employment tribunal, you could be having claims for constructive dismissal, which is where somebody is resigned because they felt that they had no alternative but to resign. So just because somebody resigns because you're starting to manage their performance, don't just grab their resignation letter. Get some advice first, because otherwise you could end up with a constructive dismissal claim. Wrongful dismissal, unfair dismissal. Wrongful dismissal is where you haven't followed a process. Unfair dismissal, again, is where you've got rid of somebody for a reason that is unfair. I haven't put in here, and I've done it on purpose, I haven't put in here the 2-year rule. Please don't think that you can rely on the person having less than 2 years of employment. It's dangerous. A lot of people say, oh, well, if they haven't got 2 years, you can just get rid of them. Great. What happens when they come back for a discrimination claim? Because actually, you don't need any service at all in order to bring a discrimination claim against somebody. And discrimination claims are uncapped. So based on age, gender, sexual orientation, marital status, disability, whether or not it's to do with the person, direct, or indirect, whether it's by association, it is a minefield. So if you're going to make a decision to manage somebody's performance or to get rid of somebody, make sure you fully understand the implications. It doesn't mean you can't do it. You can absolutely do it. We're doing it all the time, but you just need to do it, understanding what the risks are. You could end up with bullying claims, you could end up with harassment claims, you could end up with victimization claims. So again, just make sure that you've got the evidence, that it's as objective as possible, and it's not one person's view against another. Examples, as many examples as you can get, it's better. I've put there the cost of exit versus the cost of non-exit. I was talking to somebody yesterday who is with one of these large call center insured services. They ended up keeping a member of staff for 2 years when that member of staff was not performing, was upsetting clients, was upsetting customers, but they were over 65 and they were seen as very militant and high risk. And therefore, the advice that they were being given, because it was insured advice, was, well, there's nothing you can do. You just need to hang on to them. You need to understand what the cost is of maybe settling somebody out or getting rid of them and seeing if they make a claim against you, and then potentially you've got the option to settle at a later stage, versus the cost of keeping somebody in your business who is negative, who may result in other members of staff leaving, who may result in clients leaving, or bad publicity again about your organization. It is a weighing up exercise, and you need to be very, very aware of not only the money that you're paying out to get the right advice or to get rid of somebody, but actually the cost of keeping that person in your business for longer than they should be. Okay, that's the end of my set piece. I have got some special offers for you. You can only have one of them, I'm afraid, but for attending today live, a free review of your current performance management measurement tools. So that's, you know, your appraisal paperwork or your one-to-one paperwork. I'm not going to do the whole set, but if you've got something that you want us to review, we'll do that for free for you. Or we can look at your performance improvement plan template or your process that you use for performance improvements, or a free 30-minute HR strategy consultation with me. If you want to claim any of those, you need to send me an email you need to put webinar 5 offer in the subject line, and you've only got until the 31st of January in order to do that. So that is a special offer that I've got open. Okay, questions. I have no open questions, and yes, Jim, you can have a set of slides. If you want to book onto future webinars, that is the link for doing so. I've now got them lined up all the way until the end of December 2020, which is quite scary when you're putting them in the diary, but they are now in there. I am going to try and get the sound working. Well, that wasn't the right button, was it? Okay, let's try and get the sound working here. Let's see. There we go. That's not going to allow me to do it. Hold on. Let's go back to the participant screen and see if I can open that up. The problem when you're working with 2 screens is it's not going to allow to talk. Graham. No, not quite. Unmute. Graham.
Hello.
Hello. I can see that you've stuck with me till the end. Thank you.
Not bad, you. I'm here to the end. I see things through.
Good. Glad to hear it. Any questions? Anything based on what I've gone through today?
No, I think everything you've said is pretty much what we're looking for, to be honest.
Okay.
I know we're having a discussion, and some of the things you're saying is quite daunting, the uphill struggle that we face, particularly with performance management within the organisation. And it's just interesting to hear, and the slides you put across with regards to how you go about doing that without offending anyone, I guess.
Yeah, and that's always the risk. You know, people feel offended if you're trying to manage them. Yeah.
And your annual review is the worst thing to do. Is probably where we need to pick up from. So
okay, I'm coming to see you later today, so we can certainly pick that up later. That's great. Okay. Anything else, or should we call it a day there?
For me, that's fine. I think
that's fine. Okay.
So I'll get the slides. It's very good.
Perfect. Okay. I think that's it then. Yep, no other questions. So I'm going to call it a day there. Thank you very much for joining us. As I said, the link for the future sessions is bit.ly/DOHR webinar, nice and easy to remember. If you want to get booked on for those, then please do so. I've already got people booking on for the May sessions. So yeah, I look forward to seeing you all next month. Thank you very much.